3 nails on 1 cross. I am forgiven, can't hold him 3 days. You know he is risen. Yahweh is the name. Put me out that prison from bars to the bars. Now you know why I'm driven. Are you still trying to sing stuff?
No, I'm just trying to get, man. It's B-roll. It's just gonna...
B-roll. It should be A+ roll.
For sure.
Can I get serious now? My name is Phil Cook. Hear my story. The story I like to tell, the encouragement I like to give in relation to my life, where I was versus where I am, and some revelation I've had, involves a lot of going to college and experiencing that freedom and what I use that freedom for and what I believe that freedom can be used for. But like I said, growing up, I was the Christian kid in school, and I openly proclaimed that. I also really, looking back, had no real belief. It was my parents' faith, and I was forced to go. I never wanted to go. I didn't believe a lot of what I was claiming that I believed. And then I went to college, and what happens in college? Your parents aren't there to baby you all the time. So I cut that aspect out of my life, so church was no longer a part of my life, and I really kind of dropped the whole God idea, and I started doing my own thing. So my freshman year was the beginning of that, and then my sophomore year was really when I started to reap the benefits of my actions. So my girlfriend and I at the time moved in together, which was a bad idea. A little 2020 vision hindsight there. But we moved in, and I was terrified of commitment, so I'd advise you to not do that if you were in that situation. But as I moved in with her, I started to dive into lots of things that didn't help me in my life. So I started pursuing other girls while I was living with a girl. I started drinking when I had never drank before, and when I say drinking, I don't mean casually drinking. I mean I went from not drinking at all to drinking every day, basically. I always told myself I'd never do drugs. Then I did drugs, and I told myself I wouldn't keep doing drugs. I kept doing drugs, and I was like, well, I'll never buy drugs. I'll only do them when they're given to me. I started buying drugs, and I was like, well, I'll definitely never sell drugs, but what happens when you start buying a lot of drugs? I started to sell drugs as well. And that went on for, I'd say, probably about a year and a half, where my life revolved around partying. So whenever I got the chance, it was a new girl, it was a new party, it was the new thing that was going to get me that high or that feeling. And I think a lot of college kids do that. A lot of college kids, we live in a culture where that's what college is now. College isn't even about the education, it's about the experience. When I went through my phase of wanting to make a little extra money and selling some of the weed that I would buy, I remember one time I was approached by a middle-aged guy who was in one of my classes, and I'm not sure how he knew that I had stuff. But he walked up to me and he said, hey man, could I buy some weed from you? And I was a little weirded out, but I was like, yeah, sure. And he proceeded to tell me that he had a wife and 3 kids at home who he couldn't stand, and this was his way of coping. And he didn't tell them that he did this, and for some reason at the time that didn't strike me as wrong, so I sold it to him. And I remember thinking about it afterwards and thinking, I just sold drugs to a father and a husband who's going to then hide those drugs from his family. And I really challenged myself in that moment of, what am I doing? What's my purpose here? Is this what I want to be about? Is this what I want to stand for? And that was definitely a revelation moment for me of realizing that I needed something else. I just didn't know what. Actually, that was a pretty low moment now that I think about it. That was definitely one very eye-opening, at least. I came home and I was in church, and I used to hate church. It's the same church I went to as a kid, and I wasn't even particularly happy to be there that day, but my parents had asked me to go for Christmas service. And a song came on called Rise. And the chorus is, I will rise on eagle's wings. And as that chorus was being sung, I started to sing it, which I would never sing in church. And I felt like God was saying to me that he wanted me to rise out of my current situations, that there was more for me than what I was giving myself, and that he wanted better for me than I was offering through the way that I was living. And I remember closing my eyes during that song, and there was a moment that I'll never forget where everything around me stopped. I didn't hear any voices anymore. It didn't seem like the people were there anymore. All I heard was the lead singer, and I felt a hand on my left shoulder. I'll never forget it. And I didn't look to see what it was, but I knew it was God. it was the most surreal feeling I'd ever experienced, and I just was overwhelmed by this fullness and this safety. And in the moment, and let me clarify, I used to hate people that would do this type of thing in church, but I started bawling. I started crying. I sat down. I think my mom knew what was going on, bless her soul. She just sat with me and just comforted me. She didn't say a word. And that day, that moment was when I knew God had a bigger and better plan for me, and that he wanted me to walk in that. When I graduated college my senior year, so about a year later, a pretty short time frame, I went from throwing house parties with 2-3 kegs, hundreds of people, wasting all my money, to hosting Bible studies in that same house of up to 40 or 50 people. And a lot of those people were the same people I would party with. So, God really facilitated a movement, a small movement at that university at the time of people who knew there had to be something bigger, knew there had to be a greater purpose than just what the culture tells you that you should be living for.
Freestyle, what you got on top of your dome right now?
Your boy, R.I.P. to the old me. I'm living my life so boldly. I'm killing it, get to know me. Hit it, Steph Curry with the cold 3. Just call me up. I'm so real, no need to bluff. Letting God deal with my stuff. No matter what, screaming Jesus. Hey! That's it, that's all I got.